Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a recap of our 5th session of playing Frozen Sick. Our heroes had fought their way inside the Cave of Bandits and stopped for a short rest to catch their breath and mend a few wounds, and then decided to head off down one of the tunnels they had yet to try in search of the bandits' leader, whom they believed to be in possession of certain artifacts that might prove important to their investigation. As they followed the tunnel deeper, they found another large pool of water, which they would have to pass if they wanted to press on any further. They approached the pool, and despite some of the sharper-eyed members of the party warning that there might be something beneath the surface, they were once more rather surprised to find an enormous ice frog emerging from the water. Irina endeavoured to use her way with animals to coax the giant creature to see them as a friend, and at first it seemed to be working, as the creature slowly approached her outstretched hand, but sensing something amiss she was able to snatch her hand back at the last second to avoid Big Jessie the frog biting off her arm. A swift and savage combat ensued. The team poured everything they had into the frog, and thanks to some terrible rolls on the part of Big Jessie, they managed to bash its brains out before it could swallow any of them and drag them down below the water, Romand claiming the final blow with his mighty hammer. So with the frog dispatched, they now had to figure out a way to get across the pool, and Klaus suggested trying to lasso a stalactite and swing across, which after a couple of attempts they managed. Klaus went first, performing a flashy acrobatic display, holding on with his feet and ending in a backflip to show how easy it was to cross. Irina followed with equal dexterity, while Sarissa and Vlad made the trip with less flair, but nevertheless warm and dry. The same could not be said of Romand in his heavy armour, who took another icy plunge. As the team pressed on into the final chamber of the cavern complex, they encountered a roaring fire, close to which were huddled a dwarven cleric and her elven acolyte, displaying obvious signs of the mysterious disease. With neither side particularly interested in battle, they bandied words, and the party was able to learn that the dwarf was the leader of this local group of bandits, who made a living of stealing artifacts that have started to be brought back by adventurers from Islecross and selling them on to a mysterious crime family in Shady Creek Run. As the party had already surmised, Halil's sister Tolki had stolen the artifacts Ergen Wenth had brought back from Islecross and passed them on to Halil. Halil and several other bandits soon after began to show signs of the sickness that eventually claimed Ergen, and Halil suspected that the vials of blue powder were the source of the contagion, and she had found the power of her god Tiamat had been unable to lift the affliction from them, at which point she and Roman got into a bit of theology that at least didn't end in them coming to blows. The party convinced Halil to hand over the items that had been stolen, as they were investigating the cause and the cure of this disease, and that they would help Halil and her fellow afflicted if they were able to do so, alongside the veiled suggestion that Halil and her partner didn't have very many men left and weren't in particularly peak condition, and so weren't really in the best condition to deny the party's wishes. They are quite a silver-tongued party, and they were even able to convince Halil to disarm the trap on the stone chest she had laced with the blue powder and reclaim the artifacts. Along with the artifacts, the bandits had a fair stash of gold which Klaus tried to take, but was rebuked by Romand, who wanted only the artifacts that would help them with their mission, and did not want to see the bandits robbed blind and left penniless, and after a brief moment of tension, Klaus relented, earning Romand some slight favour with Halil. Thanks to Irina's sharp hearing, she was able to discern from Halil and her acolytes' whisperings that there was also an ancient tome in Halil's possession, an artifact from Islecross the bandit gang had previously acquired, that she was holding out on them. The party demanded this tome be handed over, and Halil did reluctantly, telling them that she had turned to try to decipher it became apparent that her divinely granted powers were having no effect on her disease. She hadn't been able to decipher much, but referred them to a few passages that had diagrams that looked like they could be relevant to the situation. Finally, Halil revealed that she had sold one of the blue vials to a travelling merchant on the road to Palebank village not more than a few days ago in the hopes of raising funds to purchase curatives powerful enough to rid her of sickness. So with the artifacts recovered and their new lead to find the human merchant in possession of the last vial of blue powder, the party make their leave, assuring the acolyte when he asked that Big Jessie was completely fine and they'd had no trouble in getting past her. to which the acolytes seemed very relieved. The bandits seemed to have a very close relationship with the frogs of these caves. Using Irina's mage hand to recover the rope, the party swing back across, over Big Jesse's rapidly cooling body. Irina slipped on the rope, but recovered herself, and Romand once more took the plunge, now a very cold and exhausted dwarf. Still having several hours of daylight, it being late afternoon by the time they exit the cave, the party made an uneventful journey back to the village of Palebank in the failing light, and decide to go revive themselves at the Jolly Dwarf, or the Frosty Nip, or whatever we're calling that bar, which also seems to be a good place to ask around to see if anyone knows the whereabouts of the human merchant Ivan Leal and his family. The party enter the bar, which is lively and fairly busy, but they manage to secure a table. They order food, divvy up whatever loot they've acquired, which isn't much beyond the artifacts, which they're deciding to keep as evidence for now. After some banter with the barkeep, they learn that Ivan Neal and his family are just across the bar from them, deciding to strike whilst the iron is hot and not freshen up first. The group decide that Romand and Irina are probably the most charismatic or least intimidating to send over to talk with the merchant, whilst Klaus, Sarissa and Vlad drink and crack jokes together. Romand and Irina introduce themselves to Ivan Neal and his family. Irina tries to smile endearingly at tiefling children. The sight of this strange elf in torn clothing, with flecks of poorly cleaned away dried blood still visible here and there grinning at them, doesn't have the desired effect. They get down to the business without beating too much around the bush, and as the tone of the conversation gets serious, Ivan excuses himself from the table and motions for them to follow him to another part of the bar to continue their discussion. They learn that Ivan had indeed bought a vial he assured contained a magical substance from a dwarf he met on the road for a bargain price that he then intended to sell on in Utherderm. Romand and Irina learn that Ivan and his family are a group of travelling book merchants that make their way around the various settlements of the north, plying their trade, and intend to return to Utherderm after concluding whatever little business they do here in Palebank. Ivan is distressed to learn that the vial may in fact contain a deadly disease and is worried for the safety of his family. He agrees to hand over the vial in return for a small measure of compensation of gold, which Romand gives him, and agrees with the advice that he and his family should probably quarantine themselves in their room here at the inn until the party are able to find a cure, or at least until it's apparent that Ivan and his family aren't infected. Being quite widely read, Romand and Irina show Ivan the book they got from Halil. He isn't able to understand most of the text, which is archaic with similarities to Draconian, but is able to confirm that the passages that Halil has highlighted do seem to pertain to magical poisons and pathogens, and potentially their cleansing, as he points to a passage that appears to reference the application of something to what might be the word for sphincter. Ivan and his family then retire upstairs, but Romand and Irina notice that one of the little tiefling girls issues an ominous sneeze as she ascends the stairs. The two rejoin the rest of the party at their table, and feeling pretty tired from the day's exertions, they resolve to part and get a good night's rest, and take their findings to the village's elven leader in the morning.